Despite feeling incredibly embarrassed, Renee mustered up the courage to confess her love. She poured her heart out to the man, expressing how she had fallen for him and his beautiful smile. For a brief moment, the girl was met with silence, leaving her to wonder why the man remained speechless. This only intensified her embarrassment. Renee began to question whether she had consumed too much, as she struggled to maintain her balance. However, just as she was about to stumble, the boy came to her rescue, preventing an embarrassing fall. Although the guy's height and voice seemed slightly different, the most striking difference was the color of his hair. It was then that Renee realized the dreadful truth. She had confessed her feelings to the wrong man, someone she did not love. Lost and confused, Renee couldn't help but wonder how this could have happened. Little did she know, she found herself in this awkward situation with Cavert Willard, the commander of the Knights of the entire empire and the heir of the dukedom of Willard. But what was even more significant was the fact that this man, known as the Reaper, was notorious for his evil deeds. On the battlefield, Renee had no way of knowing who stood before her, and in her confusion, she had made a grave mistake. Thus, the girl's story began, as she found herself trapped in a world where her past life had ceased to exist, and her consciousness had been transported to a magical dimension. Renee had fallen in love with someone else, someone far more significant, the Crown Prince and commander of the Sacred Order of Knights, Elvin Kashmir. His radiant smile always brought hope to those around him. She had to admit that she had mistaken this man for another before it was too late. However, Renee then noticed the beautiful sword hanging from Cavert's belt. Renee realized she was intoxicated and began speaking nonsensical confessions directed at the wrong man. Cavert interrupted her thoughts and called her by name. Renee saw the man's warm smile and he kindly asked to address her by her first name. She understood that her destiny was now sealed, and his lips, once tightly pressed, now formed a smile as they spoke softly. The girl feared that if the truth of her false confession were revealed, it would lead to their demise. Renee asked her friend if she believed the client would arrive that day, referring to the Duke without fully naming his title. Despite her friend's disapproval, Renee explained with a smile that the Duke was indeed a client of their monastery, the sole benefactor who provided them with funds to sustain Lily. Hesitantly, her friend warned that speaking so openly about the Duke could lead to punishment from the High Priest, as the Duke's visits were meant to be kept secret. Renee anxiously awaited the arrival of the Duke, fearful of making another mistake given the man's unpredictable nature. Renee had already faced death once and was determined not to let it happen again. Some girls tragically die in accidents and wake up in the body of the villain of the novel, or end up in the body of a minor noble. They can choose to lead a peaceful life despite the book's storyline, or win the heart of a minor character. Renee's case is very different from the others mentioned. The heroine died on her way home in her past life. She used to work in the school library until late at night and walk through a dark alley when she was hit by a car. After completing her task, Renee was like a zombie and couldn't avoid the collision. In her past life, Renee believed that work was more important than health. When the heroine first woke up, she was very hungry, her clothes were torn, and there was no one around to help her. Renee didn't even have a home, and the body she inhabited belonged to an orphan who didn't know his real name. Unfortunately, he was not a noble, but a beggar without food or clothing for 4 days. Since the girl entered the new world, she had not been able to eat. Renee knew that the most likely outcome was for her new life to end quickly. She cried and asked God if she could go to heaven after such a sad life. But at that moment, someone called out to Renee, and it was like a light filled the alley around her. Renee heard the voice of a man asking if she was okay. The heroine was rescued by temple workers who said that she had been there for several days, sick, and that the priest could help save Renee's life. The girl didn't realize at that moment that priests could have magic to help ordinary people. Despite being an atheist in her past life, she asked to stay in the temple and help with household chores. The priests agreed, and the girl grew up in the temple over the next 13 years. During this time, Renee learned that in the new world, gods truly exist and that magicians have healing powers. Unfortunately, there were also challenges. Because the temple where the girl lived wasn't very wealthy, they had to ask priests from other temples to come and help the people. There were only a few orphans in this temple, and thanks to the funding, they never had to go hungry. The girl became friends with Lily when they became roommates in an apartment, and they had known each other for 10 years. The priest told the girl that she could now choose her own path or stay in the temple. Since the temple didn't make much money, she could earn a lot more if she left and started her own business. However, the girl didn't think much about it and told the priest that she wanted to stay in the temple. She didn't want to work hard, and the temple provided her with security and stability. She also learned that after coming of age, there was a ritual of initiation for temple workers. During the process, she realized that her choice to stay was a mistake. Then the day of her baptism came, and she was told that the crystal ball used in the ritual could measure the level of divinity. The problem was that she actually had powerful divine powers. She was even stronger than the number one priest in her temple and had the same power as the priests from the higher temples. The girl realized that now that everyone knew about her power, she wouldn't be left alone in her regular tasks. She would have to help the temple as a rare healer. Now she could be assigned different tasks and sent to trouble spots in the empire by the chief priest of the temple. He knelt before her and asked for her help in earning more money for the temple and helping people. However, her regular chores continued, and she still had a hard time holding back her tears while working alongside the other priests. Lily informed her that today she needed to prepare a room for the Duke. Renee envied her and mentioned that the worst thing one could do is disturb the Duke while he is asleep, as even the slightest noise could be deadly with his sword. Her friend reassured Renee by explaining that the Duke is simply a commander of the Imperial Knights and is actually a good man, considering his important position. Lily questioned whether Renee truly believed that the Duke would harm someone out of annoyance. Despite the Duke's significance, he couldn't harm a cleric from the temple without facing consequences. Renee realized that it would be highly unlikely for the Duke to harm someone like her, and she needed to stay positive. Renee thanked her friend for helping her calm down, when the rain started pouring heavily, prompting the girls to rush to the temple to avoid getting their clothes wet. The heroine recalled a moment when she tried to light a candle on the Duke's table late at night, only for him to give her a menacing look, leaving her fearful of fulfilling her duties as a priestess. When Renee arrived at the temple, she was still wet and shivering from the cold due to the rain. The chief clergyman appeared and wished them a good day, noticing that Renee was wet and unwell. He asked Renee to quickly change clothes, before the guest arrived. Later, priest took Renee to his room to discuss something. At that moment, Renee didn't understand what the priest wanted, but assumed it might involve a new task. The clergyman gazed at Renee. He always sent Renee on quite difficult missions. Renee wondered if the priest knew from the beginning that she was having a hard time but did nothing to help. The father says that now is the time to try to respect Renee's decisions. The priest asks Renee if the girl knows where the kingdom of Boss is located. Remember, it is the same small kingdom located south of the empire's frontier. Now that she thought about it, she remembered hearing that the kingdom's economy was not in the best moment. The father frowned, thinking it was a correct assumption that this kingdom had declared war on the empire. The kingdoms did not have reasons to be in conflict, so the border defenses in the south were weakened, and the king's troops took advantage of this weakness to successfully attack the capital. They decided to give orders to suppress opponents to the leader of the Knight Paladins, Elwyn, and Duke Willard. The father responds that the future campaign is not only an appeal to those who have crossed the border, but they are also considering the option of seizing the kingdom and joining it to the empire. The heroine realizes why her father has elaborated so much and asks the man to stop because she has already understood the request that will come after this story. The father says that the temples have promised to send 20 healers to certain positions. If the temple only needs 20 people, the main temple can provide them. There is an order that says they cannot accept healers from only one temple. The other temples must also support the parent empire, as explained with a smile. Despite the enemy's small forces, like Renee mentioned, the commander-in-chief of the Knight Paladins and the general of Imperial Knights will participate. It will be a sure war, but having security in the form of healers is not unreasonable. Renee, who had the opportunity to refuse, immediately did so to cut off any chance of discomfort. The priest asks Renee to think about it carefully because there shouldn't be many injured. The heroine realizes that she is the person who desires security the most. People around her say that Renee should be a teenager with aspirations. Because of this, the girl has abused her body and her work for a long time, but this time she just wants to have a carefree and happy life. Renee reflects on the fact that perhaps she would like to have the usual hobbies and preoccupations of a normal person. The heroine, who lives in this magical world, has realized that wherever you go, you will always be treated like a slave. She also doesn't want to go to war because it will undoubtedly be a long journey. Renee confesses to the priest that she is afraid of war. Renee tries to give pity and utilizes her adorable charm, but then the priest tries to manipulate her. He surprises her by telling her that there will be a gift for the healers who participate in the war. The priest says that the capitals has promised 300 gold. Renee realizes that 300 gold is equivalent to 3 months of temple savings. She stated that healers must not allow allied troops to be wounded in the battlefield. The girl shines like a small sunbeam at that moment and confesses that she had been taught that healers had a role to help deal with enemies. She was interested in making a lot of money, but she did not say it openly. Not all of the gold will end up in her hands due to fees, but the remaining amount will still be enormous. Renee explains that through this war, she has gained divine enlightenment and realized that she must do whatever it takes to save the lives of others. However, deep down, she wanted to live a simple life without major changes. But since money has always ruled the world, anyone who wishes to become noble needs a great fortune to buy a title. And if Renee becomes wealthy, she will have more opportunities to live a calm and carefree life. When the heroine is left alone, she realizes that she must change before the client arrives. So she removes her dirty clothes, hoping that by aligning herself with the Duke, who has significant financial support and is also going to war, she can gain his support. In this situation, if the Duke can save her, it would be ideal. However, Renee remembers the deadly look of the Duke's face. She then worried that he'd take her out first. Renee asked Lily if she was also joining the war as a healer. Lily confirmed her friend's speculation and revealed that she would indeed be going to war. Renee questioned Lily if she was afraid. Lily explained that she had no fear because the leaders of the Holy Knights and the Imperial Knights would be accompanying them. The Knights of the Empire were also well suited for the army. Besides, healers were hard to find, so it's unlikely that they'd be attacked by the enemy, so there was no need to worry about them being killed. Lily's calm words about death sent chills down her spine. The truth is, one doesn't even need healing powers to become a priest. Renee knew that to become a priest, one simply had to go to the temple and register. If they possess some divine ability, they get specialized authority. After a test to determine their healing powers, they would be given the title of healer and begin communicating with others. There was even a professional union of healers who traveled outside the empire, named Gloria. Lily mentioned that she would gain military experience. Lily probably saw the whole thing as an extracurricular activity. Renee also explained that she had no reason to refuse going to war since she was offered 300 gold for her services as a healer. Lily's expression turned cold as she immediately realized that Renee had decided to go to war solely for the money. She felt upset seeing her friend in this light. Renee became tense and couldn't understand why Lily reacted so coldly towards her. It was then that she remembered Lily had always suggested that they join Gloria together. If Renee were to join Gloria, her employment prospects would be much higher and her work time would increase. However, Renee no longer has a desire to join Gloria. Lily believes that with Renee's skills being unemployed, her whole life as a heroine is meaningless. Renee smiles and admits that being unemployed and rich is the dream of many people. This is because Renee's dream is to have a lot of money. Lily sees war as a way to gain qualifications, but for Renee, it is a path to earn money without doing much. However, both reasons sound quite sad for some reason, but she doesn't think they're particularly bad reasons. Lily tells Renee to do what she wants, as it is her life. The protagonist shrugs her shoulders in response to Lily's objection. Lily asks the protagonist if she has spelled her name correctly. The protagonist explains that the priest checked her signature years ago, and since then, she has been using the correct spelling. Lily continues to tease Renee, which reminds her of the time when she first woke up in the new dimension and became an orphan. She wore the temple clothes for the first time, and then they asked her what her name was. She knew that her body had no name, or at least she didn't know it. The priest was observant enough to realize that the girl did not have a name. He affectionately offered to give her a name, but Renee already had a name. It was one of the last things she wanted to hold onto from her previous world. Renee couldn't bring herself to use a name from her past life, as it would sound strange in the new world. She rejected the help of the priest and insisted on having a name. She was now a part of the temple and wanted to be a new person. The priest, impressed by the young girl's behavior, wanted to teach Renee how to read and write. Later on, she assessed her new body. She decided to find a suitable name for herself, considering her light brown hair and green eyes. After 4 days of looking in the mirror, she decided on the name Renisha El-Nur. However, there was a problem. Renee couldn't contain her frustration because she couldn't spell her name correctly for a long time. In a fit of anger, she clenched her fist and broke the pen in half. At that moment, Lily laughed at how Renee had written her name in an incomprehensible way. After a while, Renee heard the clopping of horses. She remembered that a customer was supposed to come tonight and felt a shudder as the time of the visit approached. Renee arrived late, because when her amazing powers were discovered, their temple had seen an influx of guests. However, the high nobility still favored the priests of the majority religion's temples. The only thing that kept them competitive was the lower price they charged for the same treatment. About 3 years ago, Elnor found a patron for the temple. This patron was a young man who had achieved many victories in war, earning him the reputation of being the Grim Reaper of battles. He was the heir of the Duke of Willard. Renee noticed that the man had already been received by a priest. Renee quickly realized that it was time to apologize. She looked around nervously, knowing that this man, who was a duke, had the power to make her even more afraid. The duke came to her temple to sleep, but Renee was startled at first. A young duke coming to her temple to sleep was unexpected, but it made sense considering the bags under the warrior's eyes. Some nobles sought the temple's divine powers to combat insomnia, a luxury that only a few could afford. However, most of the wealthy individuals went to the central temples of the majority religion. He was actually Renee's first important client. Perhaps Cavert needed these services, as the larger temples always had many visitors. Cavert didn't want to go to crowded places, and there may have been rumors about the great warrior's visit to the temple to address his problems. Renee's small temple held all the secrets of the young lord. As Renee contemplated, she realized why he had made a substantial donation to keep their arrangement private. It seemed that he had reached an agreement with the priest to ensure that no one would know about the services Renee provided to the lord. This is why the room at the end of the hallway was personalized for Cavert. Renee couldn't help but feel that this room could also be the place where she would meet her demise. As the intimidating aura surrounding the Duke was ever present, suddenly Renee remembered when she almost died. She knows that the Duke is a skilled master of energy techniques and swordsmanship. Even among the people of the Empire, he possesses an incredibly sharp intuition. That night, when Renee realized that the candle had gone out, she had to light another match to bring back the dim light in the room before the Duke could notice. The Duke sensed it and swiftly approached, causing Renee to almost crash into the wall. Renee managed to escape with only a stumble, but she couldn't forget the terrifying eyes that stared at her from beneath the Duke's black hair. Renee felt like a defenseless chicken in the hands of a monster. After that incident, Renee obediently sat next to the Duke. Through many tests and mistakes, Renee learned how to behave with the irritable Duke, who could even be awakened by the sound of pages turning. Renee realized that today she had to ask the Duke something. She looked at his back as he undressed. Renee called him, "Sir." The heroine wanted to ask him about the upcoming war, but the Duke looked at her with confusion and wondered what exactly she wanted to know. Renee wondered if it was the first time the Duke had been asked about the war, as he seemed unaware of the current events in the Empire. But the Duke looked coldly at the girl and told her that no one would call something like that a war. Renee looked at the man with surprise, as for the first time in his life, he was capable of answering a question constructively without ignoring her. The kingdom must be too weak compared to the Empire, and the Duke has probably fought with more formidable opponents, so he doesn't consider such an event as a war. Nevertheless, she will try to improve relations with the Duke to increase her chances of survival. The girl imagined a scale from red to green, where the closer to green, the better her chances of returning to the temple safe and sound. Inspired by the Duke's words on the weakness of their adversaries, Renee announced that she'll be in his care. However, the Duke only grits his teeth at her, refusing to talk. He looks coldly at the girl. Renee tries to calm down, reminding herself that she still has many chances of survival. She responds to the Duke with a quiet voice, stating that she too will participate in the war as a healer. At that moment, the creaking inside the Duke's jaw intensifies, and he seems even more upset than before. The Duke asks the girl not to get in his way during the war. Renee trembles a little with fear, feeling that her chances of survival are decreasing as they approach the red zone. The heroine becomes angry because the Duke has treated her very poorly. Many times she sat next to him like a statue, hoping he would sleep peacefully. But he continues to demand that the girl not get in the way. Finally, the Duke reluctantly says that Renee is too noisy and goes to bed to get some sleep. Immediately, the girl transforms into stone. In the blink of an eye, 10 days fly by at the speed of light. Renee observes the autumn season playing with vibrant colors as the leaves gracefully fall from the trees. Lost in her thoughts, she ponders about the war and wonders what it would be like, as she has never witnessed one before. Uncertain of her safety, Renée is startled when she hears a voice behind her. To her surprise, she discovers two friends, one of whom exclaims with a smile to not get stabbed in his sleep. The other friend, concerned, advises him not to let a dagger stab him. Unlike the relaxed people within the empire, wars, big or small, never truly end. The empire continues to send soldiers to conquer lands and expand its territory, while maintaining peace within its own borders. However, Renée understands that this peace is built upon the heroic deeds of the empire's warriors. The hero and the Grim Reaper, these men have triumphantly participated in the suppression of many nations. Despite their shared conquests, their reputations greatly differ. Renée recalls how children on the street feared the Grim Reaper, as they believed he would come and take them away if they cried. The deaths of the Duke's loved ones, which occurred on a rainy night, were shrouded in mystery. His brother was found pass away in the residence and his father collapse in a similar manner. Renée finds it all quite strange and now understands why everyone is so afraid of Duke Cavert. When the incident happened, the entire empire was scandalized. 3 years have passed since then. Renée didn't believe the rumors, even though it was strange that the Duke always showed up on rainy days to sleep. The girl was traveling with her friend to war, claiming that there were a lot of people in the square, as if they had already returned victorious. However, Renée still felt scared. Lily responded with an intelligent look, assuring Renée that they had no chance of losing in their empire. With the hero and the Grim Reaper by their side, they would destroy all opponents. But Renée wasn't afraid of losing. She was afraid of witnessing someone's death right in front of her eyes. Lily mentioned the possibility of conflict between the leader of the Knights Paladins and the Imperial. The white and black swords would face each other in a duel. Renée looked through the carriage windows and they were being taken to the outskirt of town. Renée had been looking out of the carriage the whole time and noticed a large crowd in the distance. The knights wore golden uniforms, indicating they belonged to the paladins who served Elwyn. Renée also saw people in black uniforms, the Nickel Knights and Abnel's priest, all heading to the same place to support the warriors. Believing they were running late, Renée quickly gathered her things and rushed to join the crowd. She didn't want to be late on the first day of the campaign. When Renée finally arrived at the meeting place, she realized they weren't as late as she thought. Lily asked Renée to look. Renée sees a bright, luminous man in golden armor, marveling at his beauty. His hair is simply stunning, something Renée has never seen before. His last name, Kashmir, is a surname of the imperial family, meaning light. Renée also notices the angelic sword forged 300 years ago, wondering how well it suits the paladin. This encounter is a new experience for Renée. The healer finds herself embarrassed by the paladin hero's golden gaze. Renée guesses the chief paladin can sense people like their teacher. The hero turns to Renée and asks if she must be a clergyman of the minor temples. Renée, along with Lily, express delight in meeting the respected paladin knight. Renée notices a tremble in her voice at the end of the sentence, unlike Lily, who remains calm. The knight looks at her with a smile, warmth filling his eyes. He continues the conversation confidently, mentioning the priestess of the small temple and Renée's legendary status for achieving top results in the Empire's exam. Renée decides to apply her practiced entrepreneur smile, mentioning she has also heard much about his exploits, but Lily, who was standing next to Renée, was not pleased with her behavior. She nudges her in the side and he laughs at the funny antics of both priestesses. Renée can't help but feel better when someone so handsome smiles in front of her. He explains to the girls about the territory they are heading towards. It is the western border of the empire, which has been completely invaded by the kingdom. First things first, they will take their troops and lead them to the outskirts of the border, surrounding the enemy. At that moment, the healers must save the injured people during skirmishes. People could die, and that's not good for Renée, especially if she does it wrong. Renée gets a lump in her throat and she feels nauseous. The paladin calls out to the priestess, bringing her back to her senses, surprised at what is happening. She wonders if she has gone crazy. The paladin tells her not to worry. He says that the paladin knights swear in the name of God and the emperor, and they will not allow the enemy to even touch or approach their priests and priestesses. The girl suddenly calms down, although it hasn't been long. She feels quite bad, but it's the first time she has managed to calm down completely. While the heroine prepares for the march, she sincerely thanks the hero for his support. Their chances of survival have increased, and it's not thanks to the Duke. It's because Renée has met the leader of the Knight Paladins, and that's already a good thing. A few hours later, during the campaign, she was breathless. Renee was only thinking about the war and completely forgot something important because her destination lies in the western border surrounded by mountains. It is said that the mountains have several hundred peaks, and in reality, it is more like a tourist trip than a military campaign because Renee has to fight with her most insidious enemy, gravity. The girl is willing to do anything just to come back home to her warm bed. She cried before the cruel words of her friend, saying she doesn't have a home. Renee was referring to the temple when she said home. But apparently, Lily can't imagine the temple as her home. She remembers the words of the commander-in-chief, and they said the war would last 2 months. But Renee feels that her legs can no longer keep up with the rapid pace of the troops on the march. On the 4th day of the march, they had only climbed the second mountain. Apart from the walk, everything was going pretty well. Renee tried to keep repeating in her head like a mantra that she had 300 pieces of gold waiting for her and that everything would be fine. They announced that they would have to attack the castle in the mountains. It was a small but good fortification. Renee wondered if everything would go well. But luckily, after the battle, there were only 2 casualties. Renee didn't even have time to react when the warriors returned from the plunder. On the 4th day, nothing seemed to portend problems. Renee observed as the troops conquered one castle after another, yet there were very few wounded soldiers. They were bored, but the girls would use their powers to heal the soldiers' fatigue and minor injuries. Nothing eventful happened. Renee noticed that she lacked stamina, even though the injuries are minor. Every time Renee thought about the 300 gold, she felt a surge of strength. War was easy, but she knew she would probably die earlier due to her low stamina. As a healer, she could only use a limited amount of energy per day, so she had to evaluate the situation and use her powers only when necessary. However, Renee would sneak into a quiet and cozy place to use her own magic on herself. The girl was delighted with the surge of strength that flowed through her body when she used magic. Lily eventually found Renee and realized what she was doing. She said it would be even harder when they approached the steep main mountains. Renee wondered why Lily thought that, and she explained that there were many caves in that area where enemies could hide. From now on, there would be more injured soldiers, and when that happened, she wouldn't be able to take a break. The girls discussed the experienced healers, who had been participating in military campaigns in other countries for a while. They believed these healers would be able to return unharmed. Renee and Lily reluctantly leave their tent and squint against the bright daylight. Renee evaluates the peaks they have to climb that day and wonders if they are already too high. She thinks that the problem lies more in the difficult geography of the terrain than in the war itself. However, another shout is heard in the camp, sounding more like a panic attack than a clear order. A man urgently calls for the healers to hurry. Renee startles and realizes that they are calling for help from the camp. She turns to the man who's shouting, and the other have already rushed towards the location. Renee hesitates, thinking she shouldn't get involved, but everyone has been called. As Renee looks closer at what's happening, she notices the healers rushing ahead. She is surprised and shocked to see a bloody warrior carrying a wounded companion in his arms. Suddenly, the knights return with a large number of wounded men. One of the healers asks the boss what happened to them. The hero explains that they were taken by surprise. Warriors from the enemy kingdom were hiding in the east, ready to launch a surprise attack. There is chaos in the camp, with one of the most severely injured already unconscious with a deep chest wound. The warrior shows signs of a brutal battle, and his companion pleads for healers to help. The priest urgently orders to assist the injured person and rushes towards him. However, a sharp grunt is heard from the troop commander, demanding the priest to stop. The hero asks Renee to come closer, and although the protagonist feels insecure and fearful, she is asked to heal the warrior as best as she can. She ponders, why should she heal the poor man now? The healer who has already arrived says he will do it and doesn't need help. However, the hero in command of the troops questions if the priestess Renee would be more effective in healing the soldier. The commander's words were shocking to Renee, who had only become a priestess 3 years ago. It is clear that Varsa has more experience compared to her. But then, why did the captain personally ask Renee to take care of the injured man? The prince asked her directly, so Renee cannot ignore the order and must save the man as soon as possible. Renee hears the murmurs of the crowd behind her, discussing her actions. People were not happy to see what was happening and watched with disdain as Renee took charge of healing the soldier. Renee successfully used her power when healing the wounded soldiers. After the healing was complete, Renee decided to talk to her friend Lily, who thinks that the paladin hero must have realized that Renee's abilities are greater than Varsa's. Instead of exhausting her by forcing her to use 90% of her divine power, they decided to find a more efficient method and only use 30% of Renee's power, which would be sufficient for the warrior's recovery. Renee wonders why she was summoned, even though she is from a small temple and there are already healers from the capital's temple. Renee assumes that Varsa and his people were humiliated by her skills, and their pride will likely cause trouble. Lily asks Renee what she plans to do now. Renee and Lily's conversation is suddenly interrupted by other priests. One of the healers snatches the bread from Renee's hands, claiming that the priest Varsa needs it to feel better. The girl politely asks Renee if she would mind giving up her bread to Varsa. Renee realizes that they're acting childish and stealing food. The girl, with a smile, hopes for Varsa's quick recovery. Lily wonders what her friend has been discussing with Varsa's servants for so long. She is angry that they took Renee's food and threatens to destroy them if Renee allows it. Lily stands up abruptly, determined to confront the attackers. She approaches them and wishes them a good day. Lily mentions seeing something embarrassing and poses an interesting question to the priests. One of the priestess happily explains that Renee generously donated the bread to them for Varsa's sake. Lily's eyes gleam mischievously as she asks an uncomfortable question and takes back the stolen bread. The priestess's smile was wiped away, but it was still evident that the girl had turned pale from Lily's piercing gaze. A commotion ensued, with many people gathering to inquire about the conflict in the camp. Renee realized the gravity of the situation and worried about her friend's well-being in that moment. She expressed her belief that following God does not guarantee happiness, as noble acts often require sacrifices. Lily speculated that perhaps the teachings in the Great Temple were similar, discouraging profiting from such sacrifices. The girl who had stolen Renee's bread was taken aback by Lily's arguments, as she believed that the priests should assist people and act with honesty. Lily, with a predatory smile, mentioned that there were plenty of examples to support her claims. The 4 boys who had already received their bread approached Renee and requested to share it. It could be seen as a form of extortion, but Lily doubted that the priests of God would stoop so low. The crowd, witnessing the scandal, whispered amongst themselves, fearing the consequences. Lily confidently stated that true priests of God would undoubtedly know the distinction between donations and ordinary extortion. Renee couldn't help but think that Lily's legendary skill in verbal combat had resurfaced. However, she pondered who would attend to the wounded if the priests were unable to work together. Lily expressed her regret that the priests had fallen so low, hoping for a swift recovery for Varsa. Varsa was astonished by Lily's strength and felt powerless as the girl took the bread from him. Lily emphasizes the importance of self-care and how it cannot be neglected. She criticizes Varsa and belittles him, claiming that he is beyond repair and cannot rebuild himself. Lily worries about the kind of treatment that people who end up in Varsa's hands will receive. Varsa's stomach couldn't handle the humiliation, as he had never experienced such degradation before. In an act of kindness, Lily gives the bread to her friend Renee. Renee expresses gratitude to her savior and ensures that the bread is clean before eating it. The protagonist observes the trembling bread thieves and realizes that they are not worth getting upset over. The protagonist doesn't want to upset her friend, who may not be able to control themselves later on. The camp becomes chaotic once again as the warriors fall into an ambush. The people do their duty to save as many as possible, and by the end of the day, all the priests are exhausted. They exerted all their strength to heal the injured gentleman after the brutal battles. Just as Lily mentioned, the mountains were incredibly steep and filled with surprise ambushes. Skilled warriors took advantage of the terrain to launch unexpected attacks and defeat the Empire's warriors. Renee was the only one capable of healing the most severe wounds due to her immense divine power. Renee always remained standing until the very end, while the priests eventually gave in. Renee couldn't deny that the warriors were tired. They relied on Renee because she had the support of the hero, who recognized her exceptional magical power. However, this popularity brought its own set of challenges, as many injured individuals sought Renee's help at the end of each day. Renee felt overwhelmed and regretted the absence of coffee and alcohol, which were prohibited during the military campaign. Nevertheless, the people in the camp were grateful for her healing abilities, as they had become accustomed to relying on her. They praise her incredible healing skills. However, Cavert hadn't needed any treatment since the beginning of his expedition. Renee believed that the leaders of the Knight Paladins didn't require healers either, even though everyone else had been wounded at least once during the campaign. In her free time, Renee would find solace in the forests surrounding the camp, feeling free and alive. However, her peaceful moment was interrupted by a man's voice. The priestess turned towards the source of the sound, only to realize that it was one of the knights. Renee recognized Gardiel by his autumnal red hair and his reassuring smile that always brought comfort to people. The boy noticed that he had frightened the girl and showed her his already healed wound. He expressed his gratitude for her help. Renee mentioned that the gentleman's shoulder was now healed, with only a small scar remaining after a serious injury. She was glad that she could assist the knight. Renee remembered that the wound had been deep, and if she had arrived a little later, it would have been tragic. Renee asked Gardiel if he was afraid of going on an exploration mission, considering that he could have lost his life. Fear for the lives of the people she helped had made it difficult for Renee to sleep well for a long time. However, she realized that she wasn't the only one who might be concerned about this. Gardiel responded happily to the healer, assuring her that he never worried about his wounds because the beautiful healer, Renee, would always save him. The warrior looks at his beautiful healer and the girl who has captured his heart with a smile. Gardiel responds to Renee, stating that if he were to flee, he would put the people who rely on him in danger. Gardiel proudly displays his strong arms and insists that he must be the one to take the risk in order to save the lives of his fellow soldiers. Renee ponders this for a moment. Gardiel is on the front line because he does not fear death. Renee asks Gardiel if he accepts her apology and she admits that she was wrong, but the warrior responds by asking Renee not to apologize because he is solely concerned about his well-being. Worried about Renee's health, Gardiel tells her that the commander easily defeats enemies with his sacred sword and is not afraid of the blessings of light. Renee realizes that this is true and even a glance at the commander's sword is enough to understand its significance. Gardiel emphasizes the commander's accomplishments, but what he really wants to convey is what the commander said about Renee to his subordinates. The girl is surprised and wonders if it could actually be true. Why would the commander talk about her? Gardiel explains that the commander mentioned the god who brought them together. Renee is taken aback because she had actually joined the war for money. Gardiel also mentions that the commander referred to Renee as the messenger of God, which embarrasses Renee greatly. When Gardiel finally leaves, the girl can finally breathe a sigh of relief because compared to the other men, he was too energetic. Renee wonders how it is possible for a man who seems like a deity to call her the messenger of God. She truly desires to see this man's face up close, aside from their initial meeting and the day the commander ordered her to heal a wounded knight. Renee ponders alone, wondering if she will ever have the chance to see the commander when he is injured. The heroine realizes that these reflections are going beyond all limits. As a healer, she only wants what's best for her people. When the girl returns to the camp, she overhears Varsa talking with Elvin. Apparently, there are only one wounded soldiers. The commander orders Varsa to take care of him, while he tells Renee to come to his tent. Renee's heart almost pounds out her chest, as she would be left alone with the commander.